today on the iRacing Downshift. Kevin misses half the show. Kevin's not here, so this is me pretending to be Kevin, saying something silly. I almost die. And Chris gives laundry tips.
Beer and dirt suck way more to wash out than coffee.
All that and more. So strap in. Welcome to the iRacing Downshift. I'm your host, Greg West. I'm here with the boys, Kevin, Bob, and Chris Leone. We got a special show for you today. We're going to talk about the... Chris, give me the tagline because I'll mess it up.
eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing Series season finale from Homestead-Miami Speedway.
Wow. That was
well done.
There was like a little extra zest on that.
So something pretty cool happened with that one, huh?
Sure did.
Wow, we're going country this time.
I guess we are. I hope everybody tuned into NASCAR America on NBCSN to see that finale. What a finish. What a great race. And I think we're going to have a very special guest this week, aren't we, Greg?
Yeah, Zack Novak is in the studio at iRacing, also known as the room that we keep simulators in. Very fancy.
With our fold-up tables.
With our fold-up tables.
Very fancy.
Yeah, we have fold-up card tables as our soundboard that we don't know how to work. But yeah, we'll have Zach on here in a little while to talk about that awesome race, especially that last lap battle with Keegan. Last few laps battle, but 0.15 of a second, not to be outdone. We're going to talk about the real-world recap where NASCAR was at Talladega, and they did it by 0.07. What was the gap?
It was pretty close. It was one of the closest in NASCAR history, I think.
The sixth closest finish in NASCAR history, I believe. I'm probably going to have to edit myself out later in this.
This is interesting. This is the first time Chris didn't know the precise number.
I win. Things I didn't say after the throw and go challenge.
Can't wait till we get to that segment.
We'll also talk about here in a little bit. Let's start off with PEAK. Chris, walk us through it.
Oh, what a race. And again, first of all, huge thank you to our partners at NASCAR and at NBC Sports for giving us the 2 hours on NASCAR America to wrap up this eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing Series season.
Ding!
What an incredible race. I mean, we had 3 of the championship 4 qualify in the top 4. Zack Novak, Keegan Leahy coming in as the favorites, but Bobby Zelensky obviously won his way in by winning at the Charlotte Roval, and then you had Blake Reynolds who kind of pointed his way in, Mr. Consistency throughout the season, and all 4 of them seem to have their moments in the sun, seem to have their moments up front, but in the end, as I think a lot of us thought would be the case, it really came down to Zack and Keegan. And, the final 10 laps, they were trading the lead, going back and forth, and what a last lap. What a turn 4. I mean, Keegan tried to sucker Zack with making the move to the outside and move to the inside, but he just couldn't make that pass stick. And
so obviously the race couldn't have gone any better. It was super exciting, but I want to talk about what a moment for esports racing just in general, to have it on NBC Sports Network. We also did stream it on Twitch and elsewhere, but to have that, the ability to showcase our sport to all of America was just amazing. I mean, we had if you followed us on Twitter, we had a bit of an office watch party here. Tons of guys from the office were here watching it. It was super exciting. We were literally sitting on the edges of our seat. Obviously, we work in this business, so you want everything to technically go right. You want to have a good show. You want to have a good finish. And all of that worked. So it was really one of the coolest moments in sim racing for me.
Yeah, Steve looked like he was a little bit stressed.
We should have had a camera on Steve.
Maybe not, but he has probably a few more gray hairs. But to watch the guys like Steve and Otto, yourself, Tony, that have been at this for 10 plus years, to see it all come to fruition, it was a really special moment in iRacing, one we won't soon forget. Super excited for the finale, that when Zack crosses the line and you just see like the moment of, oh, what the heck just happened? Then you see his family come in and all but tackle him. That was a cool moment. Another thing that was super impressive, though, was Keegan Leahy, because that last lap battle, they ran it clean. And Keegan posted afterwards, and I was really impressed with this on Twitter. He's like, could I have doored him for 40K? Yeah, I could have, but that's not how we do it on iRacing. And
yeah, that was kind of the quote of the day. And you almost, if there was contact, you almost wouldn't have blamed him, right? I mean, there's a lot of money on the line. They were running tight, but they were super respectful, and the finish was amazing.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the respect between those two guys on, in that last 10, 15 lap battle. I mean, I think when we get to Homestead in November with the Real World Cup Series, if it comes down to two guys who are championship eligible going into turn 4 on the final lap, I don't know that they're going to be quite as polite, but, again, that was so impressive by Keegan. And I don't know, we stereotype the Canadians as being super nice people, and I guess Keegan didn't really disprove that, but...
Well, let's clarify. You stereotype that.
Okay,
Speak for yourself there,
We don't like to.
Christopher.
We don't like to stereotype anybody. So.
That's
the
come
official
on,
iRacing line, anyway.
Yeah,
So.
come on. We love our Canadians. We love our Canadian fans and our tracks.
Here's a shovel. Keep digging. Moving on, PEAK was not the only World Championship Series that we had going on last week. We also had Rallycross at Daytona. Chris, this is kind of your baby.
Yes, sir, Greg. IRX at Daytona, Mitchell DeYoung, and we all know that name not only from the real world, but from being the first IRX champion. Returned to the top step of the podium. Nobody else has won a Thrustmaster iRacing Rallycross World Championship race. I missed the ding, guys.
Ding.
Nobody else has won at Daytona in that series other than Mitchell. And I guess that makes sense because Mitchell is the guy who got to run that track in the real world for a couple of years. But not only taking the victory, but also taking the points lead from Sammy Matty Trogan after taking that win. So it's a real close battle. They're only separated by 7 points right now. And Trogan going from the LCQ to third place obviously saved his spot in the championship. But we've got a really tight battle. It's pretty Subaru heavy at the front, and that's no surprise. They're very popular cars, and I actually visited the Subaru Motorsports USA shop this past week, and you can really see why. But that first Volkswagen snuck into the final this weekend with Adria Perez, so we'll see how that goes for the future. Those cars are kind of outnumbered, but they're still pretty fast.
Heading to Sonoma next week. Should be another exciting race, but we also had USAC in action this week. Chris, once again, you're the expert on all things dirt, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yep, the iRacing USAC World Championship presented by Flow Racing finally had a different winner. David Heileman's 3-race win streak snaps. James Edens takes the victory and closes into second in points, but a lot of those front runners all had issues. Either they finished towards the back in the final or they didn't even make it. So Heileman's got a 127-point lead now with 4 races remaining, and it is going to take a lot of work by the guys behind him to erase that.
That wraps up This Week in iRacing, but now it's time for our special guest driving all the way from Connecticut. Okay, that's not really all the way, but all the way from Connecticut, Zack Novak in studio. All right, Kevin and I are really excited here for our guest this week, Zack Novak, winner of the eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing Series Championship, fresh off kicking some butt at Homestead last week. Zack, thanks for driving up, man.
Thanks for having me.
It's a good start.
Good start. Awesome to have you. It worked out well. You're semi-local, a New Englander,
Yep.
so cool that you could just kind of drive up here instead of putting you on a plane or something. It's like for the Porsche Esports Super Cup, we had you get Josh Rogers. He's from Australia, so
You
so
were
we're
more
glad you won.
local. Notice you were on the show and he's not.
Yeah.
Sorry, Josh, if you're listening. But I want to go back through the last week. It's been pretty crazy. I noticed immediately after the race, your Discord went to Do Not Disturb. I'm assuming that every part of communication you have is blown up.
Yeah. Twitter, I gained like 800 followers.
I don't even have 800 followers.
It was pretty much like instant within a 5-day span. I got a bunch of people adding me on Facebook that I've never even talked to before. Same thing with Instagram. Bunch of people messaging me on Facebook that I've never talked to before. It was really, really cool, but it kind of gets overwhelming too. So, I mean, it just comes with it, and that's kind of what I wanted was to win, to get all the recognition, and it's everything you work towards.
Yeah,
So,
well, you certainly deserve all that. You had a great season, right? 4 wins, started with a win, ended with a win, a couple in
Yep.
the middle. I mean, doesn't get much better than that,
Yeah.
right? And along with those wins, some pretty solid finishes too.
Yeah.
It's not like you just kind of got lucky or something. You had a great season, and you had a great year last year as well, right? So this isn't the first time you've won something pretty big.
So let's roll it back a little bit, because you have really risen through all of the ranks that are iRacing. You're the former Ignite winner. How did that help prepare you for coming into the PEAK Series?
Did it ignite your racing career? Sorry.
Something else I should probably edit out that I'll forget to edit out.
You could use that. But no, I mean, iRacing in general has helped me a lot in just kind of maturing myself, and I've met a lot of people that are older than me that have helped mature my personality. And on top of that, obviously, my driving, I feel like I'm ahead of a lot of people my age in terms of race car talent because of iRacing. And Ignite itself taught me a lot about preparation and how to approach a big race like that.
Let's focus on that for a second. We're talking about approach. So compared to the series championship last year in Ignite to this year, a little bit bigger stage, NBC telecast, all that. What do you think the biggest difference was in your preparation?
Well, I think Ignite, I just didn't need to practice as much because it's fixed. It was in a Legend car, which obviously a Legend is still difficult, but it's a little easier than the Cup car.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the PEAK series from 1st to 40th is really, really, really good. And so they're all super close within like a tenth and a half of each other. And Ignite, although there's still really, really good competition, there's a more of like a split, I guess you could say, from 1st to, say, 30th.
That makes total sense. The PEAK Series is the premier, the top level. It's the hardest one to get into. Everybody in that series, they're phenomenal oval drivers and road course drivers as well. And so to be able to compete against those guys is pretty darn impressive.
All right, well, we talked about preparation. Let's talk about the race. It's a race day itself. Let's talk about, you woke up that morning. It was kind of funny watching the four finalists, watching their Twitter feeds, and the kind of the memes that were going out there, and who hadn't slept and who slept well. And let's talk about the day leading up to the race.
Well, I actually slept pretty good the night before, surprisingly. But I woke up pretty early in the morning, around like 8 o'clock. Tried out a setup that I really hadn't drove until
on the day
then.
of the race. You're still messing with your setup.
Yep. Right. I tried out. It was basically our Kentucky setup, but we went in two different directions. We were working with the eSport Racing Group for that race, and they went one direction, and then Taylor Hurst, Jimmy Mullis, and I, who are on Lockdown Racing in terms of our iRacing team, we went in a slightly different direction. And we decided that because the track was cold, we figured that the direction that everybody at the eSport Racing Group went in would be a little bit better for the track conditions. So I decided to take that setup, try it out that morning. It was really fast. So I just said, okay, I'm racing this, and sat there all day until like 2:30, and then did some qualifying, and that was that.
So how many hours total, you think, before the race did you have in the cockpit on race day?
Probably 2 hours.
Okay, so nothing obnoxious, but still, a fair amount of practice, especially for a setup change on race day.
I try to keep the amount of driving I do on race days minimal. I try to get everything done like on the race setup before the day of the race. So in normal cases, Mondays, I want to have everything set for Tuesday that day. And then I'll do qualifying normally around 5 o'clock or so on Tuesdays, which in this case, it was Thursday. So I did qualifying around 2 o'clock or so. But for the most part, I try to keep it as minimal amount of track time on race day as possible. So
that makes sense. You want to be fresh for the race. So let's talk about the race itself. Talk about your qualifying and how you thought it went compared to what you thought it was going to be. And
well, we really have not been good at qualifying this year. We had a few good qualifying efforts. Indy, I probably could have went close to pole if I didn't blow up. So that, I started 35th and I couldn't go anywhere. Where else did I qualify well? Obviously, I qualified well at Homestead, so that was nice. Kentucky, I qualified well.
You won that race, right?
Yep. So I mean,
So that seems to help, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some.
These are speed secrets from the best guys. Qualify well increases your chances of winning.
We've had some good qualifying efforts for sure, but for the most part, we've been kind of like middle of the pack, like 15th or worse. Which with this package, I mean, it's doable to come from the back because you can gain so many spots on restarts, and so I never really worried about it too much until this week, or I guess this race, Homestead. We spend a lot of time just preparing a Q set itself instead of normally we'd take our race setup, make some changes, and go qualify on that and see how it does. So,
Cool. So let me ask you this: after good qualifying, the race starts. What were your nerves like going into that? Was it a regular peak race? Was it like amped up to 11, 12, 13, or was it just like I got to race and do my thing?
It was just regular, honestly. Like I was telling some of my teammates before the race, like that was the best I've ever felt mentally going into a race. Obviously, like I don't really get too nervous going into races, but it's just kind of like an approach that you have sometimes in bigger stages that you'll kind of just naturally get nervous. And for Ignite last year, I was pretty nervous going into that, and I think I taught myself after that race that it's kind of useless to be nervous. Like there's just no point, because you're going to make more mistakes than if you just show up like it's any other race. And obviously those last 5 laps or so, the nerves started amping up. But for the most part, like I was really, really comfortable the whole time. And as you saw on my face cam, I was pretty much
chilling, man.
straight face. Like I didn't
looked
have
pretty
any
relaxed.
emotions going on.
Yeah.
Well,
But there were some emotions at the end, though.
Well, yeah.
Which was awesome. That was the coolest part.
So let's talk about how the race unfolded. We're just kind of walking along here, quali into the race. Big long green flag run to start it out. We were completely okay with that on the iRacing side, but a couple of later restarts. How did from your position, how did you feel like the race was unfolding?
Well, even before the race, I figured Keegan would have the best long run car, so we kind of approached it as if we're going to beat him anywhere, it's going to be on the short run. So that's kind of how we set up the car, was to be as fast as possible on the short runs. And so that long run definitely didn't help us at the beginning because he was like 0.3 a lap quicker than everybody.
He checked out.
He was really fast.
He broke the draft and by himself and said bye.
Yeah. I knew he'd do that just because he's been that fast everywhere for the last half of the season, really. And so, so we tried to be as best as we could be on the short run. And as soon as that caution came out around, lap 80 or so, I knew we definitely had a chance at the race because I figured a few more cautions would come out. We'd get one probably around 20 to go, which we did. So that was pretty much perfect scenario for us.
And then let's talk about 10 to go, because that's kind of where it really started to heat up. 5 to go, it got really nuts, and 1 to go obviously was insane. But let's walk us through those last 10 laps.
I figured he wouldn't be as good as he was on the short run, and he was really, really good on the short run, that last run. So I figured I'd be able to pass him, pull him a few tenths, and then just hold it there. But instead, I'm pretty sure he cleared me on the inside of turn 1 around 10 to go. Mm-hmm. And then I sat behind him. My short run speed started to show itself, and I was hanging on his bumper pretty easily. And then I believe it was 6 to go. I didn't feel anything at that point. Like I was just driving a normal race, and I was trying to get a run on him. I really couldn't because of the way the air works. If you sit right behind someone, you can't just get a huge run on them unless you're half a second faster than them, which is exactly how it is in real life. You can't just sit behind someone and get a run on them. And so I tried something different. I improvised a little bit. I went to the top, got a really, really good run off the top, and then when I sent it into turn one, I pretty much just hoped that he wasn't going to counter my slide job, because if he sent it in really deep on my outside, that would pretty much counter it. I wouldn't be able to clear it.
You'd be out of momentum at that point.
Yeah, so, I mean, for my sake, luckily he didn't, and I got to clear him, and then that's kind of where the nerves started to kick in a little bit. Every lap down the back straightaway, I'm just like, come on, like, just please. All I wanted was to get to the white flag at that point, so we didn't have any more restarts, and then race it out from there.
So let's talk about it. Get the white flag. He is all up in your mirror.
Yeah.
He threw a dummy down the backstretch, and it looked like he got you for a second.
The entire office thought were getting past right there. Everybody was like, "Wow, what's happening?"
It was loud here.
Yeah.
I knew he wanted the top.
Yeah.
Because, well, I figured he wanted the top at least because it was just so dominant after about 15 laps on the tires. There was just so much grip up there. And I knew I couldn't give it up. I figured if I gave it up, then that's the race. So I kind of threw the block down low, figured he'd obviously follow it. He was far enough back to where he couldn't just stick it on my outside and really go anywhere with it. So that block I threw was kind of to make him go lower than he needed to going into the corner. And then last second I swerved up to block any chance he had at the top side. And then from there it was just hoping he doesn't put me in the wall and just hoping I don't put myself in the wall. And I figured if we raced clean off the corner, then there was no chance I was going to lose that, honestly, because the top just had so much momentum to it.
So you've raced Keegan a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going in 3. He got a position on you. He looked like he was going to be able to make a run at it. What are your thoughts? I mean, obviously, besides, I hope he doesn't put me in the wall. I mean, did you feel like that he was going to run you clean? I mean, you guys have raced, pretty clean all year.
Yeah, I figured he would. We actually exchanged words before the restart very quickly, and he basically said, whatever happens, I just wanted to make sure that it's a good, clean race. And I agreed completely. I think, although, we're trying to make money, obviously, and then obviously just have fun, we're also promoting iRacing and NASCAR as a whole and trying to make the whole thing in general just look good. And I think if we just came off of turn 4 and wrecked each other, it'd just make it look like awful. And, I think that shows what iRacing and sim racing is it's when you get to the competitive level, it's clean. People care about racing you clean, and they're not just going to wreck you for money or prestige, because that's just not, it's not fun. Like, we're mainly doing this for fun, and there's no point to, like I said, that there's no point to just wreck someone for it. It's not rewarding.
That's awesome attitude. Perfect for what everybody involved in this needs. NASCAR, iRacing, sim racers. You're exactly right. We're trying to grow this sport across sim racing in general, NASCAR in particular, but all forms of sim racing.
Yeah.
And to have races like that on television is exactly what we need. And you guys raced hard. It's not like you didn't. You just raced clean. We were talking earlier in the podcast about how would that if that's how Homestead happens in the real world NASCAR race. I don't know that somebody's not getting bored.
Somebody's backward for that much money.
So hats off to you guys for racing clean and representing well. Roush Fenway's got to be super excited.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sitting here looking at you with the Roush Fenway sweatshirt. It's super cool. I mean, what does it feel like to wear that as part of the team, not just a fan, right? We all have sweatshirts that have teams we like or whatever, but you're part of it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've had my connection with Jackson Martin from Roush Fenway, and I've talked to him all year, and he's always been extremely supportive of everything. And I also talked to the team president, Steve Newmark, after the race. That was really, really cool. He's shot me a text really quick and just said how happy he was for me and how happy he was to have me as a part of the organization. And that's just so cool to me, is that they actually care about calling me a part of their team instead of just some other sim racer, some other gamer even.
Yeah, it's really cool how the NASCAR teams really have bought into the whole process that is, our PEAK series and sim racing in general, and I think you're going to continue to see that grow as we continue. I want to go back to the race for just a second. When did you know you had it?
Right as I got straight off of turn 4, I started freaking out.
The longest couple hundred yards in your
Yeah.
sim racing career.
Yeah, right.
Because he kind of, once you had the momentum on the top, he kind of almost tucked in.
Yeah, once I cleared him, I knew there was no chance of running out of fuel. Nothing. The only thing that could happen is I lost power, but that'd be so unlucky. So I didn't even think about that.
How close were you on fuel?
Oh, it wasn't even close.
Not even
it was,
ballpark.
He's not going to tell us.
Yeah, it wasn't even close.
He was
'cause
on
we,
fumes.
We actually full fueled. A fuel run was about 50 laps or so, give or take. And we full fueled around, I believe it was the lap 80 caution. And my crew chief was basically telling me, we're going to go these first 10 laps of the restart and see if it's even possible to make it. Because we knew we weren't going to beat him just straight up unless we got short runs. And so we kind of wanted to go a little bit out of the box and try and win it. And we were going to try to stretch about a 55-lap run. And so I had a full tank of gas. And then when the second caution came out with about 50 to go, I'm not sure. I don't remember what he did with the fuel, but we had at least 17 in it. I'm pretty sure it was another full tank. But yeah, from there I didn't touch the fuel for the rest of the race or nothing. So it was just, I don't think we were even close.
Cool. All right, so you cross the line. Of course, do the coolest burn down you've probably ever done in your life. And then one of I think the most epic part of the whole thing is when your family rushed in behind you. That, I think, made the broadcast and had a couple guys in the office with tears in their eyes. And
Yeah, there's no other sport in the world where that can happen, where you can win a championship like that and your family is there 3 seconds later.
Yeah.
It can't happen.
Yeah, that is true.
So what'd your mom say to you? Because we didn't have audio.
She just said she was so proud of me, and that's pretty much what she said it 4 times. Cool. That was just an unbelievable experience. She was even in there. We had my dogs in there. Everybody was there.
Oh, we saw.
Yeah.
So that was just kind of the beginning of the night for you, though, wasn't it?
Mhm, yeah.
So now this is the part that no one sees. So the lights are the cameras are off, and what happens the rest? Walk us through the rest of your night, and then really the last week.
Well, I obviously have a lot of people to thank after that. I can't just go without telling them how much it means to me, and people that helped me for months, years. They need to know that I really appreciate that. And so that's pretty much what I did right after I was off air and everything. I just told everybody individually that, thank you, and I really do appreciate what they did to help me. And then went and ate dinner with my family, so that was cool.
They make you
regular night,
They make
huh?
you pick up the tab. You don't have to answer that.
And then we just hung out, I guess. It wasn't really anything crazy. We didn't do a huge celebration or anything. We just, we're just low-key people. We like to just hang out, and so that's what we did.
Super cool. Now, you've done a fair amount of media in the last week. Talk us through that.
Well, I did an interview with Steve Lovender for NASCAR.com. He asked me a bunch of really good questions. That article
Probably better than these.
Craig's asking you.
that article is on NASCAR.com if you want to check it out. did some interviews with other news companies. I did a camera interview, Skype interview with Cheddar Esports, and they have like a crazy following, so that was nerve-wracking but cool. I did some podcasts, some just I don't know what the word is, like normal podcasts, I guess, like lower,
not necessarily sim racing, but like,
well, I mean, yeah, like racing related, I guess, like just NASCAR as a whole. And that's really cool because they'll bring me on and be like, NASCAR Champion, Zack Novak. And, it's they're referring to me as like something that they cover every week, I guess you could say. They're not like sim racing, dedicated to sim racing. It's just a broad variety of NASCAR stuff. And so they'll bring me on and refer to me as, like I said, a NASCAR champion. And that's pretty reassuring to me, is like, through all like the hate comments and people saying like, oh, why should I care about this? People do care about it.
Yep.
And people have a genuine interest in watching these races because they think that iRacing has put together such a good product to where it's worth taking the time out of your day to watch. And a lot of people, more good than bad, have noticed that. And so there's a ton of people that have shown me support. And obviously with those podcasts and interviews and whatnot, it definitely reassures that.
very cool. So I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask, coolest thing that's happened to you in the last week?
Well, the Dale Jr. tweet that we talked about, that was nuts. He's so huge for everybody in the racing world, and every single person knows him, and that was just crazy to me that he took the time out of his day, because he's really, really busy all the time. He's got to be, just because of how famous he is. And he
has like 6 jobs, so it's not,
Yeah, right?
he took the time out of his day to watch our race, and then send even though it was a pretty short tweet, it means really a lot to me.
He looked up your username.
Yeah.
So that means there was some effort in that.
No, absolutely. It really shows how far sim racing's come, and what a great representative you are of this sport. I'm curious though, getting away from the racing. Like, I know you from iRacing and winning a bunch of races and all that. What do you do besides sim race? Like, you have a dog, you got a family. What?
So
you logged into Apex Legends last night on Discord.
Oh, there we go. All right. So other games or?
Yeah, I just play a lot of video games. I've pretty much built like a second family almost from people from iRacing, and one of my fellow competitors, Jimmy Mullis, I go to his house like 3 times a year in Charlotte. So I go to the races with him pretty much every time they're at Charlotte. And that's been a huge relationship for me, and it's given me, again, reassurance that this it's not just another game, it's a legitimate community that people have built, and I feel like I have a great one where I'm at, and I just like to hang out with them a lot of the time, and we just mess around and have fun with it. But there's time to be serious, and obviously that time is during peak races and preparing for peak races, but most of the time it's just about enjoying ourselves, playing video games, maybe watching a sports game together, something along those lines. But I really don't do much outside of that. I just don't really. I'm pretty simple.
You seem like a pretty low key guy.
Yeah.
That's my style. I like that.
So.
As you get older, that'll become the norm even more, I promise.
Yeah.
Big Friday night in bed by 9:30 after falling asleep on the couch. I had something. I had a question. Oh, going back to this. Oh, you mentioned community. I think this is something that new users that come to iRacing, they don't know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
Because the community, I think, is the biggest selling point of iRacing. It sells itself. You find out once you get into you find what you want to drive, and then you realize you're racing against the same guys fairly often.
Yeah.
You get to know them. You know how they race. You know who you can run close with. You know who to kind of avoid because they're going to dump it in one. But it's that community, and I'm like you. I have a ton of friends that I've met through the service that, even though we don't maybe necessarily drive on the service together anymore, this summer I went to Iowa to the IndyCar race with a buddy of mine that I met through iRacing, and next thing I know, I'm with that entire group of guys from the league, and we're watching an IndyCar race, and that was pretty wild. And there's stories like that from almost every member we have. They have become friends with people through the service, so it's super cool, a part of it. I had one other question. I want to go back a little bit. Have you talked to Keegan since the race?
I have. I had a few words with him. He seemed pretty disappointed, obviously, for good reason, because I probably would have been too. But he handled it.
He still did all right, though. He got a nice check.
Yeah, he handled it really well, though. He didn't, go on a sob story or anything like that. Like, he just said, I wanted to race clean, and we had a good race, and he said he enjoyed it, and I think that's the perfect outlook to go for. And I know it's pretty easy to say, oh, well, you won, so blah, blah, blah. Like, how can you, or you're just saying that, something like that. And I really do mean it, that he had pretty much the best outlook possible on how everything went. And I gained a lot of respect for him for racing the way he did. And I think that's going to carry towards, future years and future championships. Is racing like that is going to leave a good impression on people. So
I suspect we're going to see both you guys up at the front of the field next year. So.
I hope so.
I can't wait to watch it. Yeah. It's going to be a really good time. Well, Zack Novak, thanks for driving up. Thanks to your sister for driving with you from Connecticut this morning. I think we'll buy you lunch. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, we'll get back to the rest of the podcast. Thanks a lot. Moving on to our real-world recap. NASCAR at Kansas, playoff cutoff. Chris, what a race, especially Joey Logano there at the end with the save.
God, what a race, Greg. I mean, you had three drivers going for two spots there. I mean, you had Joey Logano, who obviously had that wreck towards the very end that could have bumped him out. You had Chase Elliott, just fighting tooth and nail in the top five. And then you had Brad Keselowski, and you didn't know if Brad was going to hang on, and then you got to that final restart, and then it became obvious, no, he was not. So that's got to be a huge disappointment for the two-car. But
what about Denny Hamlin?
Yeah, I know.
Where's this been? It's like always a bridesmaid, and now all of a sudden, he's got to be the favorite.
Has he been watching those commercials with Rowdy Burns in them? Those Michael Rooker commercials on NBC? I know you hear me, Denny Hamlin.
I know you hear me.
I know you hear me. And yeah, Denny has been living up to his sponsor, and he has been delivering this year. I think if you came into the season, you kind of worried about, is Denny still going to be at JGR after this year? Because you had Christopher Bell coming up. That has been solved. Denny won the Daytona 500. Denny has won multiple races, and now he is right up there with Truex. He is right up there with guys like that who are establishing themselves as the favorites to go to Homestead. This could be Denny's year.
It's interesting you said Truex as well, because I think he's going to be there at the end. Kyle Busch, you can't count him out in the M&M's car. It's going to be a pretty solid battle. They're going to Martinsville. Denny's excited about going to Martinsville. I think a lot of the guys are going to be an epic race. Super stoked to watch that. Now let's roll back to Xfinity, and let's talk about the Briscoe and Bell battle there at the end. Little lap traffic interference, 5-yard penalty. Replay first down.
Garrett Smithley has not made a lot of friends in NASCAR, unfortunately, over the past, month and a half.
Yeah, but not his best work.
Yeah, that one's tough.
He owned it.
He did own it.
But you can only own it so many times.
You took the words right out of my mouth. You can only own it so many times. You have to think that a driver like that is learning from those mistakes, but when you make too many of those mistakes on too high of a level, on too large of a platform, then eventually you're going to be on your way out, unfortunately. I think that any driver who's had a couple of high-profile things like that has the capability of learning. I mean, remember when David Reagan debuted and Tony Stewart called him a dart without feathers? David Reagan came back. He took over the 6 car. He won some races. Like, drivers can learn. Drivers can improve. I mean, we've seen that in all levels of racing. I think it'll be the same with Garrett Smithley, especially because he knows that the focus is on him now.
But how about Brandon Jones? Just comes in and steals one.
A lot of drivers, what is it about those Menards paint schemes? Those drivers, they just come in and steal some victories, some titles sometimes. I mean, remember Paul Menard at the Brickyard a few years ago? Paul Menard stealing his first Cup victory, and I think Simon Pagenaud in IndyCar, I think his first title. I think that was the year that Menards came on board with them. It's something about that neon yellow.
There's an old drag racer named Joe Amato that used to say, "I'd rather be lucky than good any day," and I think that definitely holds true here. But let's move on to the week ahead. NASCAR going to Martinsville with the Cup cars and the trucks, beating and banging. My favorite. I love short track racing.
Oh, so do I. And Martinsville has got to be one of my favorites. I mean, no matter what it is, whether I'm watching it, whether I'm playing it in iRacing, even though I'm terrible.
Really bad, guys. You think I'm bad? No, Chris.
There is a reason why I don't do the throw and go challenges, guys, and it's because when Greg and Kevin start, we would still be here a couple hours later. They'd be wanting to record the show, and I'd still be limping it around because I probably took at least 2 wheels off. But now Martinsville, I mean, like you said, Denny Hamlin's got to be a favorite. Chase Elliott's got to be a favorite. Did those two have a little bit of history at Martinsville?
Gee, I wonder if is it going to repeat itself.
God, I can't remember.
That's not the only racing going on this week. We also have Lucas Oil Off-Road at Wild Horse Pass. Chris, I feel like that's kind of specific to iRacing.
It sure is, Greg. I mean, when we debuted Lucas Oil Off-Road earlier this year, Wild Horse Pass was one of the first 2 tracks that we were able to drop. And I love Wild Horse Pass. It's kind of a shorter layout, but it's challenging. It's interesting. You really have to be precise at Wild Horse Pass, and I cannot wait to watch this real-world season finale on Saturday. There are a lot of tight points battles in Lucas Oil Off-Road. I mean, RJ Anderson is always up there. RJ is whose trucks we scanned. Just Jeremy McGrath. If you were an old-school Supercross fan, Jeremy McGrath just came back earlier this month in Glen Helen and just dropped a bomb on everybody, just kicked everybody's butt. And it's going to be real interesting to see if he can do that again in Pro 2. But, fantastic race product. It's always fun to see the end of the season at Lucas Oil. At the end of the Lucas Oil season at Wild Horse Pass, they also do the Challenge Cup race where they put the Pro 4s and the Pro 2s on the track at the same time. I love those races. I love seeing the Pro 2s launch and then the Pro 4s just go try to catch them. But it's going to be a really cool stream on Saturday, Lucas Oil Racing TV. One of our own Peak Series owners, Jim Beaver, is actually the play-by-play guy over at Lucas, so little bit more of an iRacing connection there.
Little bit more. Moving on, since Kevin's still flying back from Germany, we did the throw and go earlier this week, last week when we tried to record. Since Kevin's not here this week, he gets a DNS. I'm going to claim the victory. I'm going to take this one. Kevin's not going to hear about this until he listens to the podcast, but now it's Greg 2, Kevin still a lot more. But
I guess I'm the arbitrary, like the third party. I'm the official there. I have to declare it.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, you're sitting in front of me and Kevin's not, so Kevin can't really do anything about it.
But I just spilled coffee all over your iPad and your pants. So I don't know if that helped my cause. But I'll take it.
Dude, I have been sprayed with so much worse at the racetrack. You get covered in beer, you get covered in dirt. Like, coffee, nothing. It's fine. The iPad survived. It's fine. Beer and dirt suck way more to wash out than coffee.
Well, thank you guys again for listening to the iRacing Downshift. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. If you want it to show up somewhere that it's not, well, tell Chris and he'll put it somewhere. He does all that good stuff. But for the now absent Kevin Bobbitt, Chris Leone, I'm Greg West. We'll see you at the track.